Hey folks, thanks for tuning into my YouTube channel, and today we're going to be throwing a plate. I'll also be following up with a video on how I'm trimming the plate and how I finish them up and load them into the kiln. I don't get much in the way of warping in my electric kiln with the plates, so these are going to be 11 to 12 inch dinner plates. When they're finished, they'll get thrown to about 13-ish inches or so on the wheel. So follow along. So when I'm making dinner plates, I like to use 5 pounds of clay, which might seem like a lot, but these are going to have a trimmed foot on them, and I want to make sure that there's enough clay for a substantial foot. You might see Finn, one of our dogs, in the background while I'm making the video today. And when I'm making pretty much anything, I usually work in small batches. So these will be batches of 8. I threw 8 with red clay this morning, and I'm going to be throwing 8 more with this white clay this afternoon. I'm using clay from our local supplier, Paoli Clay Company. It's here just outside of Madison, Wisconsin. So I'm shooting for 5 pounds each. And like I said, this is a white stoneware from Paoli Clay. This is their DSM half grog recipe. So DSM, it's a Don Wright's clay recipe from back in the day. And this, fresh out of the bag clay. I don't worry about getting too over the top with how I wedge it. I am mostly just wedging it to make sure it's pretty homogeneous. And with plates, it's not a huge deal because you're mostly just centering it and squishing it. When I am primarily on like production throwing days, I like to make sure I'm not doing more than like one board of pots at a time. So for me, that could be anywhere from like 3 or 4 to 20 if I'm talking about small cups. So in the case of these, I'll show you here shortly how I lay them out on my big work table while I'm making plates. I threw 8 earlier, and then I take a break to wedge up more. I don't do it all in one sitting. It's a good excuse to get up, move around a little bit. It's good for your body to not just be sitting at the wheel all the time. Plates don't fit on my wear carts as well as a lot of my smaller forms do, or taller, narrower forms. So I like to lay them out on my, it's about a 3x8 table. The most plates I'll usually do in one go is about 18. This is 16. So those I threw earlier today. The red clay ones, that's Brooklyn red clay from Standard 308. So I just lay these out on my bats. The bats I make myself out of some masonite, and then I cut them into octagons that are 12 inches wide, and then drill holes to fit my bat pins. Ideally get 2-sided masonite. They didn't have it during the pandemic at my hardware store, so this is all one-sided stuff, but a sheet of masonite's like $30, and you can get like 32 bats out of one sheet for like $1 or $2 a bat. They do warp a little bit over time, especially the single-sided ones. So like eventually I'll have to cut more, but the cost differential I think is definitely worth it. Plastic bats are really expensive, and these bats will allow moisture to absorb out of the bottom, which is really helpful to make sure that plates are not getting too dry on the edges compared to the center. And I'll talk more about that when we get to the trimming part in the next video. So let's get throwing. Well, my studio is still a little disorganized from my holiday sale, and then we were out of town visiting family for a couple weeks. So let's just talk a little bit about the tools that I use to throw my plates. So I've got my Brent wheel here. I also have a Pacifica over there. So, you know, whatever wheel you have, they probably have bat pins. A lot of the things that I throw, I do not use bats for. I just pick them right off the wheel when I'm done. So since some stuff I use bats for, some stuff I don't use bats for, a lot of things I don't use bats for, I don't leave my bat pins in permanently. So I just slide them in. And occasionally they pull out a little bit. For the most part, they stay right where they need to be. And then as far as tools go, I've got my bucket of water here. That was warmer this morning. In the wintertime in my studio, we've had such mild weather, I haven't really gotten it out, but I'll use a fish tank heater in my throwing water to keep it warm. It's just kind of nice if it's cold out. So this right here is I think he calls them platter ribs, but this is from Troy Bungart, who's in Southern Michigan. He makes amazing tools. So a lot of my wooden ribs are stuff that I've gotten from Troy. They're handmade. He also makes amazing pots. So he really knows how to produce some really quality, I think this one's oak, quality tools that are also like supremely functional for pottery because he uses the tools that he makes. So this is going to be my main rib that I use to set the interior of the bowl. I also have this wooden knife tool. This is another one from Troy. Here, I don't know what sort of mahogany, beautiful wood he used on this one, but it just lets me get up under there. I've got a couple different wooden knives that I use. This is just the one that I happen to be using today. This flat side works really good for lid galleries too. I've got a needle tool handy in case I need it for some reason. I don't typically use this much when I'm throwing with plates, although I'll check the bottom thickness for the video. As far as throwing sponges go, I take the sponges that come in our pyrometric cone boxes and I rip those in like halves or quarters and use those until they get too ratty and I don't want to use them anymore, and then they go in the trash. So it's a good way to like use something that would normally get thrown out anyways. It's a little trick I got from Adam Field. And then I've always got my big tile sponge handy as well. So the last tool is this wire knife here. And this, Bill Van Gilder makes them. You can find his website. I'll put all the stuff in the comments. Feel free to fast forward through this section if you don't want to listen to what tools I'm using. But the wire knife, you'll see what I use this for when I get there. It's got a replaceable wire. You can get two different thicknesses. This is, I think, the thicker wire, because this comes in handy for some of the other stuff that I use. Otherwise, if I was just using it for the plates, I'd probably use the thinner wire. The thinner wire works really good for softer clay, which this would definitely be in this case. I do use it on like leather hard clay a lot too, so I like the thicker wire for that. Like I mentioned, I use these masonite bats, and these are unfortunately the masonite that I made this last batch of these out of. They only had the one-sided masonite at the hardware store. I made these during the pandemic, and that's what they had. So usually I'll add a little water to the back. It just kind of helps everything stick down and warp a little less because you're getting the top wet, so you also get the bottom wet. And then I scrape them off really good after I use them each time, but I just want to wipe that off. And like I said, I was throwing with red clay earlier this morning. I don't mind getting a little bit of cross-contamination with the iron, from the iron-rich clay onto the white clay. It's not going to make much of a difference. The red clay is used for my like matte glazes, and then my fake ash glazes are going on the white clay. So that's why I'm using two different clays. So I stick it right on there. You want to make sure there's no air bubbles trapped underneath there. And 5 pounds of clay seems like a lot. This is pretty soft. Paoli mixes this clay relatively soft, which is really nice for plates. It's a lot easier on your wrists. So I'll just drag my pinky on the bottom to make sure that I'm getting a seal to the bat. And then I'm pushing down with my left hand to make sure that I've got a seal onto the bat. And now I'm ready to cone it a little bit. So I'm just going to push in from both sides. And I'm just leaning in. You'll see my whole upper body leans in. I have my wheel raised up so that the splash pan is pretty much even with my belly button. So it's a nice comfortable position. It forces me to keep my back straight while I'm throwing, which is really helpful. So I just push in from both sides. I'm not trying to center it when I cone up, I'm just trying to make it taller, and then I center back down. So I'll show you this from a couple different angles here. We'll go through, I'll make 3 plates with you from 3 different angles. So going in, and then the meaty part of my hand is just off to one side of center. My right hand is bracing. You'll notice my right hand is resting right on the splash pan, so it's nice and solid. You can also rest it on your knee, whatever works for you. And then I'm just gonna keep centering it down. And I wanna make sure that I'm keeping this dome shape and I'm not trapping slip up under here. I'm gonna push down from the center, and I'm mostly pushing with like the meaty part of my hand right here. Once I get it, so I'm as wide as the bat pins, which are 10 inches. So I'm gonna get this about 11 inches wide to start with, but I wanna start getting this clay from here out here. So I switch up my hand position. My right hand goes in the center, my left hand's on the outside, my pinky is tracing right along the outside here. You can use a fist, you can use karate chop. I like the karate chop, so I can use this part of my hand, and I just intertwine my thumbs a little bit so I've got good support. Make sure you got plenty of water on there, and then I'm just pushing into the center, and that's making a bowl. And so I'm pushing in with this bone that sticks out in your hand right there, so that makes like a nice kind of concave shape for the plate anyways. And I just push down, and then I bring my hand straight in towards my belly, using less and less pressure as I get out to the edge. My left hand is pushing in to make sure that this is staying centered. So this hand's coming out towards me, my left hand's pushing in from the outside. I go all the way to the edge. I'm gonna let this get a little wider. There we go, and ease off at the end. I'm gonna just make sure I don't have any goofiness going on, slip build up in the corner there. So right now I've got like a 11 inch or so, just round, flat, centered pancake. So at this point I'm gonna get out my platter rib, and I'm going to, I use this towards the center and this side on the outside. You know, if you want to put a rim on your plate, you'll hold things differently. Find a tool that works for you. Find something that's comfortable for you to hold and that gives you the curvature that you like. You can also make your own tools, cutting them out of like a thick piece of plastic or piece of wood or something yourself. So I'm pushing towards the center first. You can see that this whole part of the tool is making contact in here, okay? So I don't normally, a lot of this is muscle memory for me at this point, but if I want to check my thickness here, I'm about right on, I think. So I'm about a ½ inch or so thick, right in the center. Yeah, we'll call that, it's about a ½ inch, maybe a hair less than a centimeter, somewhere in there. 9 millimeters maybe, for those of you that like metric. So I don't want to go much thinner than that, because I don't want the plate, when I trim the foot, I don't want the middle to rest on the table. Otherwise you'll get a wobbly plate. So I've got that depth set, and then I'm just moving this tool straight out, holding it perpendicular to the direction that the wheel is spinning. And once I get it wide enough, which is just, so like I said, I've got a 12-inch bat. So once this gets right to the edge of this bat, I don't want it to go any farther. It's a good size for dinner plates. Before I'm gonna throw the rim a little bit. So now, once I get to the outside, I'm gonna go back towards the center. A lot of times you'll hear people say, oh, make sure you compress evenly, and you're compressing the clay. Clay is essentially a suspension of a solid in a liquid. So it's a fluid, and fluids are non-compressible. So compression is a word that we use for kind of applying pressure on the clay to make sure that you are creating a homogeneous mixture of clay throughout the cross section of the piece. So it's making sure that you don't have slippy bits or pockets of air and slip trapped into your clay. So it's basically ensuring that things dry more evenly and you don't have wet spots and dry spots that are going to cause S-cracks and things like that. Things need to dry slowly and evenly. That's what causes cracks, is things shrinking unevenly or things not drying evenly. It's not actually compression. Okay, if you don't believe me, I know there's a Ceramics Monthly article that Simon Levin and one of his former apprentices, Ian Connors, wrote. This would have been a few years ago. About it, they did some kind of testing with clay, but like, you know, there's people that throw off the hump all the time that don't have S-cracks and stuff. It's a matter of drying. So you'll get goop that comes off the clay, that's fine. So I'm coming through and I'm just, I don't like using the word compression, so I'm gonna say I'm setting my rim here. So I'm just making sure that that's all even and I don't have like slippy goop coming off. And what I'm gonna do is to get up under there, and I'm gonna go in until I feel my bat pin. So I'm going in to 10 inches. This is about an 11, 12 inch rim right now. It's gonna go a little wider. And I'm just making this sort of sweeping motion with my finger. If you wanna use a sponge on your finger, because it wears down your fingernails sometimes, do that. You can also use a wooden knife if that works for you. Find what works for you and go with it. So I'm just pushing in with my pointer finger. My left hand's just gently setting there, supporting, and I'm pushing in until I can feel my bat pins, which is right about there. And now I'm gonna grab my wooden knife here and I'm just undercutting right underneath there. And the reason I'm doing that is it's gonna make it easier for me to cut these off the bat tomorrow when I go to trim them. So I'm gonna set my rim again, damp sponge, make sure I don't have any water pooling up unnecessarily. I'm resting my finger underneath there, supported on the splash pan, and then I'm throwing this out. And I like having a nice substantial rim on plates because that's the most likely portion of something that's gonna chip. So these, the rims are relatively thick and I'm really okay with that. I'll make them a little thinner when I go to trim, but I wanna make sure I got plenty of clay here to work with. These are about 13 inches wide right now. So this would be an absolutely fine place to stop. You could go in with your rib and refine the shape. You could set a rim now. There's lots of options. I'm gonna give myself some sides to my rim. So I've got these 8-sided bats, so it's really easy for me to figure out where 8 sides are in the first place. So I'm just lining up my cutter with the flat sides here and supporting underneath. Bada bing, bada boom. More edges on them, and doing fewer edges kind of helps define them a little better. So I've kind of gone down to 8, which is a nice easy number. So I'm going to take my sponge, and you'll notice the rims look all messed up right now. So I'm just going around and cleaning up where I just cut it so it's rounded over again. There we go. All right. And then I'll do it while the wheel's spinning a little bit. And I'm just making sure I've got nice, smooth rim. There we go. And I'm gonna grab my platter rib again. And this curve right in here is kind of where I want that to line up with the supported part of my foot. So this is very similar to if you're doing bowls. You don't want the hump of shame. I don't want my plate to do some goofy thing right in this area. I want it to be a nice smooth curve. If you're doing a rim, you know, you can lean into that sort of tendency a little bit and make sure that that's where your rim flattens out. These are going to be like, these won't have a formal rim on them. So I'm holding this at about a 45-degree angle like this, so it's smushing the clay as opposed to scraping the clay. And then I always want to hold it with the tip pointing towards the center so that this is roughly perpendicular to how the wheel's spinning. And we'll lay that down. And normally I do this all in one go, but I just want to show you what's happening is you can see that it's scraping the clay away here and here, but not right in here. So this is that problem area that I'm talking about, that you want to make sure that you're pressing into that part. So my plate is supported up to right about here, and then this is all cantilevered out. So I don't want to drop this rim down anymore. I'm just going to push the clay from here to here towards that edge of the supported portion. And I'm just going to flip my hand around because I'm right-handed and this works easier for me. So my left hand just sits underneath like this. So I'm just rotating it like that, setting this hand on the bottom. These fingers are just supporting the clay right here. And I like this because I can see what my rib is doing a little better. And then I'll just move this right towards the center. There we go. Hey, Finn. There we go. If you're someone that wants to have trim lines or throwing lines on the surface of your plate, now's a good time to put them in. And then I'm just taking my sponge again. You'll get some sharp edges that the clay moves out to on the rim. So I want to get rid of those. So I'll just get it spinning nice and slow. There we go. And then I need to pop it off. If you ever have an issue with your bats sticking down, putty knives are really good tools. I do have a narrower one that I'll use sometimes, but it just helps me get under there and lift off the bat without too much drama. And because I undercut that earlier, it's going to be pretty easy for me to get a wire under this tomorrow. So there's that. I'm going to do this from two other angles a little bit quicker than this first one. I won't stop so much to talk through my process, but good luck throwing plates. All right, so we'll get this centered, cone up, and push back down. Make sure you don't get slip built up underneath here. So I'm just gonna keep it centered, and I'm gonna make a nice, about 11-inch pancake here. And I'm just pulling my right hand right towards myself. There we go. And gonna take my Troy Bungart platter rib, and this has got a flat top right now, so now I wanna put in the curve. So I'm starting in the center. And if I go and stick my needle tool in here just for everybody's measurement sake, it's about a 1/2 centimeter or so thick, so I've got plenty of clay to take off later when I go and trim. And then back to the center. Using my fingers to get rid of any slip. The slip wants to build up right on the edge of these plates all the time because you're always pushing the clay out there. Get rid of the slippy goop. And now I'm going to undercut with my finger. I'm going in until I can feel my bat pins, which is about a 10-inch diameter. So I can feel my bat pins now. And at this point, there we go, I'm going to undercut a little bit with my wooden knife so it's easier to get these off when I go to trim them tomorrow. All right. Yeah, a couple little uneven bits on the rim, but that's gonna get fixed here momentarily. So I want to set my rim. Notice I got some slip that came off. That's what was making that all uneven on the rim. So I'm supporting with my fingers on the top and the bottom and then pushing in just a little bit, applying some even pressure and pushing in with my sponge on the right hand. Notice how much more centered that looks. And then supporting the bottom, I'm going to throw the rim. And this is one of those real slow and steady. It takes a long time for the wheel head to move one full rotation out at the end here. So I don't want to pull out too fast. Set my rim again. There we go. Flatten that out just a tad. And now I can start cutting my rim. Obviously, you do not need to cut the rim if you don't want that, if that's not the look for you. You know, experiment with different ways of treating the rims and the surfaces of your pieces. You know, if you're someone that wants to have a rim, that's a really good way of making your plates look a little more formal and less casual. I like my plates looking a little more organic and fluid, so I've put rims on plates in the past, and I've kind of gone away from that. Might make a comeback someday. We'll see. But for these, all right. Clean up and soften those edges, those hard edges I just made. I'm just going through and softening those. There we go. And then I'm going to get in with my rib. And this is the spot that I want to make sure looks really good, right in here. So some folks would leave it kind of like this.
You could define that really nice if you want to have a proper formal rim on your piece. I do not, so I'm going to get rid of it. Make sure you're holding your rib, whatever shape rib you're using, at like a nice kind of 45-degree angle to the clay, so it smushes the clay instead of scrapes the clay. And I just slowly apply pressure from the outside to the inside. So most of it, I'm just slowly rocking that in like that, and then touch up the rim one more time. You'll know I go back to the rim like 3 or 4 times, maybe probably more than that, just to make sure that I don't have any, sharp spots or weird uneven bits or anything like that. I want to make sure that the rim is nice and strong and rounded, so it's not likely to chip when people are using their plates. Dinnerware, tableware needs to be functional. These are all, great in the microwave and dishwasher, so keep that up. I'm going to shoot this from one more angle, from right over to my right-hand side, the opposite side of this. All right, so we've already got it on the bat. Get it centered up really good here. So make sure you're getting the slip and stuff so nothing's building up right in there. And I'm shooting for about an 11-inch flat wheel of clay, which is about where we're at. The slip's going to make it really easy for you to tell where I'm scraping away clay with the rib here. And back to the center. And if you need to go back and forth a couple of times, I'm not quite happy with the curve on this one yet, so I might go back and forth a couple of times, clean off your rib in between. If you're getting a bunch of slit built up out here, which I am, go ahead and just get rid of it. So all this goopy stuff, we don't need that. That's about 12 inches wide now. I'm just gonna clean this rim up a little bit. And then I'm getting my finger right into there. This is a really good view for this. And I'm just going in there until I can feel the bat pins, which I think I'm there now. So, I'm taking clay off when I do that. That's totally normal and acceptable. So I'll just clean up underneath here a little bit. I'll use the side of my thumb sometimes just to clean up that bat. And then I can use my wooden knife to just undercut a little bit, which this is a step that, sometimes I get in the zone and totally forget this step, which is not good because I will regret it tomorrow. And you got to do this before you lay down your rim. Otherwise, you can't get your tool up under there anymore. So that's why I'm doing it now. But basically, this little undercut lip under there, you can see where that's getting into. That's going to make it really easy for me to get. And you can see there, I'm bumping my bat pins there. That's going to make it really easy to get your wire under there to cut these off tomorrow. So I don't cut them off right away because I find that it like you end up just having to cut it again anyways. So I'll set my pointer finger underneath here. You could use a different finger if that's more comfortable. And I'm pushing in just a little bit, but mostly it's just there as a brace and a guide. And I'm pushing the clay from the inside onto this finger. At this point, I'm trying not to add a whole lot more slip. You'll notice I'm working a little faster on this last plate because I'm not stopping in and explaining as much stuff for you. And you'll notice I'm adding a lot less slip because I'm working a little bit quicker, so my hands aren't drying off. And the biggest thing is you don't necessarily have to have a lot of slip on the clay. The big thing is you don't want to have changes in friction while that's going around. So if you've got wet and dry spots on different parts, that's going to cause more issues than just having a generally dry surface to throw. All right, so I like the thickness of all this. Feeling good. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'll make my cuts to my rim. Like I said before, experiment with some different stuff. See what is fun for you to do. Some people like having a proper formal rim on there. I'm not a huge fan of it. I don't need it for the kind of food that we eat at home. Here in Wisconsin, we do have a fair amount of hot dish, but even around the holidays and stuff, having a rim, it can be really helpful with kids or older folks if they're starting to lose some of their dexterity. It can be really helpful to have a rim on a plate. But for what we do most of the time, and these have enough curve where pasta works pretty well in them. I do make a more proper pasta bowl that's a little bit deeper. Same amount of clay, very similar, just a lot deeper. All right, so clean up my edges. You'll see how just gnarly the edges look right now and sloppy, so we want to get those cleaned up. And you can use your wheel just like a banding wheel. This Brent wheel that I throw most of my work on, it's kind of loud, but I like it because it's a good sort of auditory cue as to how fast your wheel is moving. So those of you that are watching on YouTube here can, if you hear the wheel in the background, you can tell really well how fast I'm moving based on how loud the wheel is and the pitch of the wheel. So that's a little helpful, I think. But you can also use it like a banding wheel. So now I'm going to get in there with my platter rib again. I don't know why, but I always come in with my left hand a little bit first. And I'm just making sure I've got I'm kind of even through here. I do want the thickest part to be right at the rim, so don't thin out your rims. It's really tempting to thin them out. Leave them nice and thick. Your plate will be less likely to chip. It's going to be a lot stronger. It's going to make for a lot more durable tableware. And now I'm just pushing down from the opposite way. This lets me, from my angle, see underneath the rib really well. And you can see I've got one little streak. It's a little shinier than everything else. Then that's where I haven't hit. So I don't want that part there. I want to make sure I'm applying enough pressure to get that all smoothed out. There we go. And then move in towards the center. This one's a little shallower than what I want, so I'm going to lift up on the rim a little bit. So I'm just lifting up on the rib and pushing that into my a little better. You know, if you're not happy with it now, fix it now. Don't wait till later. There we go. All right. Take the time to make the best piece that you can possibly make. When I'm sitting down and throwing and making work, I always try to make each piece better than the last piece. And, you know, if you're doing repetitive forms, like this plate is, you know, these are all going to be pretty similar. They'll be within about a ½ inch of each other once they're fired. You know, maybe less than that even. It's all muscle memory, and I'm using the same amount of clay. I'm not measuring to a caliper. I'm just getting some of this extra clay off the wheel. But take your time, get everything as best as you can do, and then if there was something that you wanted to go back and fix, make a note of that and fix it on the next plate or the next cup or mug or whatever form you're working on. And occasionally I can feel it happening right now because I don't have my bat pins screwed in. Sometimes they'll come out or attach to my bat when I pull it off, so I'm just aware of that. Anyways, have a great time throwing plates, everybody, and thanks for tuning in. Cheers.